Hello, welcome to Bored of It. I'm Farrell, this is Tally.
Hello.
And welcome to our review of Nemesis Lockdown, the standalone expansion to the big box survival horror game, Nemesis. Now, Nemesis is a particularly popular game, considering it's in the top 20 board games of all time list on BGG, so a lot is expected of this standalone expansion. But with that said, this review is going to mainly focus on Nemesis Lockdown as a standalone game and on its own merits. So if you're interested in knowing more about the Nemesis universe or a factual comparison between the two games, feel free to check out our Nemesis Buyer's Guide, which we will link down below, and there should also be a link floating around up here.
Nemesis Lockdown is set after the events of Nemesis, where the ship has made it to Mars, and the survivors and some alien eggs have been rounded up and locked away in this Martian facility. Obviously, everything goes wrong, and now it's up to you to escape. In technical terms, this is a semi-cooperative survival horror board game because every player is given a secret objective that they're required to complete, which might come at the expense of another player. The gameplay is all driven through cards, which you'll be using to do actions, explore the facility, complete your objective, and hopefully escape before the game ends. Unfortunately, you also have to contend with the Nightstalkers, a terrifying alien race which is hell-bent on eating you. Lockdown is harsh, unforgiving, and random, but damn if it doesn't make for one hell of an experience. In Lockdown, you'll choose to play as one of 6 unique characters, each with a mostly unique deck of cards. The gameplay is driven via card play, where on your turn you'll either play a card to do the action written on that card, or discard any card to do basic actions like move and attack. Lockdown is set in a research facility on Mars, and which character you choose will impact where you begin the game. Mostly what you'll be doing is exploring the facility and finding new rooms, as most of the rooms begin the game unrevealed. Each player will also start the game with 2 secret objectives, and much of what you'll be doing is trying to find the room that your objective might require and then attempting to escape the facility.
The twist is, every time you move, you make a noise roll. And this means you have to place a noise marker in an adjacent corridor, and if you ever place 2 noise markers in the same corridor, you attract a Nightstalker. And between the Nightstalkers, horrendous event cards, and other players trying to kill you, you'll be extremely lucky to make it out of this game alive. And even if you do survive, getting out is not straightforward. You could take the rover and go out the main gate, except this main gate doesn't open until a player dies, or the facility's auto-destruct sequence is irreversible. You could hole up in the isolation room, except this doesn't open until halfway through the game, and if the facility is destroyed, you're dead. Lastly, you could take a risk and send yourself out in a pod in the cargo sending system up here, except different types of pods launch at different times, and it's a bit of a risk. You often have to gamble, and if you go in the wrong pod at the wrong time, then you don't get out of the facility, you take damage. And even if you escape, you have something else to contend with, the active contingency token. And these are signals that the facility director has sent to the incoming forces, telling them who to save and who to kill. So you need to make sure you and the players work together to figure out what this active token is, because that's the only way you'll be able to survive. Because it might say, if you're in the isolation room, you die. So you want to know that you don't want to be in the isolation room.
The most important thing to do if you're in any way interested in Lockdown is decide whether it's for you. The game is built from the ground up on randomness. It can be horribly unfair, and usually is. Almost everything that happens to the players is brutal. There's player elimination, where a player can literally be out of the game within 30 minutes as they die through no fault of their own, and this can be a 3-hour plus game. However, Lockdown uses this randomness to create incredibly climactic moments, tense drama, memorable gaming sessions, perhaps better than any other game in this genre. There's a reason why the original Nemesis is in the BGG top 20 games list.
So, think you know if you want it? Not so fast. The next thing you have to do and deal with is learning the damn game. Because with Lockdown, and Nemesis, there are so many unique rooms, actions, and situations that can occur, which then combine with the inherent randomness of Lockdown to create really unique situations that will have you checking the rulebook constantly. And for the weirder stuff, you better hope that it's already been solved on the BGG forums.
Right, so I have a question. I'm in the nest with the Nightstalker, and I'm in combat with the Nightstalker, but I want to shoot the eggs.
Yeah.
Can I still do that because it's a special combat action?
That's an interesting question. Let me look at the nest, the intruders. All right, I figured, Tally? We played this game a number of times, and in our 5th game, almost everything that came out of Tally's mouth was a question about the game. 5th play. And as to our credentials, we've played original Nemesis a bunch of times, and we regularly play games that are rated more complex. And I actually think the complexity ratings of both Lockdown and Nemesis are complete jokes. First of all, this is rated as less complex than the original Nemesis, but it's original Nemesis with more mechanisms on top. And yeah, I just think they both should be much higher, but that's a personal opinion. Much of the blame has to go to the rulebook and the way the game conveys information. I find it particularly egregious that they've charged this price for this game, and were able to copy 80% of the rulebook from Nemesis, and yet they didn't use the money they made or the time they saved to make sure this was correctly edited and informative, because there are immediately apparent mistakes, and much of the information to do with the new mechanics is severely lacking. One example, nowhere in that rulebook do they go through each individual contingency token, and understanding these is crucial to winning the game. And that might have been okay, they might have got away with it, except for the fact that the help cards contradict the tokens themselves, which means when you go to the rulebook for a final ruling, isn't there. There's also a second side to this board, which has a new rule set, and the rules for this are particularly poorly written and slapped haphazardly onto the back of the rulebook, and it makes it difficult to know if you're playing properly or not. In general, I find the ordering of information in the rulebook illogical, and I particularly hate the habit they have of making information that's really just as important as anything else before it go below the main body of text in really small font. It's just like this rulebook is already a monster. Just lean into it. Don't skimp on the text size, just make it a clear and informative monster. Because the way it is now makes it easy to miss information that's important, and often you're even looking in the wrong place. Lastly, the room tiles only have the most cursory information printed on them, despite the fact they're all very varied and have different things and effects. It means that it's very easy for new players to miss what a room can do, or even miss if it's a room with an action at all, looking at you, Nexus. And unless players are fastidiously checking the rulebook every single time they go into a new room, people are going to miss things and it's going to hurt them.
However, aside from when the questions arise, the moment-to-moment gameplay is incredibly streamlined. Playing the game itself is simple through the clever card-driven action system, yet you have an absolute sandbox of a game with incredible depth and which oozes theme. No two games are even going to be remotely the same due to the randomised room layout, variety of the objectives and general randomness of the noise rolls and event cards. You'll be creating completely new stories, which you'll be sure to remember for a long time, as I know we certainly do. Lockdown is a box of intense, dramatic experiences, although not all of them are going to be pleasant.
But maybe you can avoid some of those unpleasant experiences, because Lockdown gives players more control over their fate than ever before, due to the new power system. And this is where, using specific room actions, you can power up sections of the facility and get numerous benefits for doing so. All noise markers will be removed when players pass. You'll get to roll a better dice if you're shooting at Nightstalker. You'll get to use computer actions, and the effects of some event and attack cards won't apply to you if you're in a section with power. Oh, it can be difficult to do, but it's worth it. And we find this to be a tremendously fun mechanism. It oozes theme, and it provides players with a semblance of control over their hostile environment. And that's particularly important for a game like this, where people will likely die because it makes them feel like they've done what they could, rather than just being a passive punching bag to the Nightstalkers.
We love how all of the content in Lockdown ties together, as all of the room tiles and characters integrate smartly into the new mechanisms brought into play. Even better, the characters provide a partially asymmetric experience due to their unique action decks. And there are no duds here. We've had real fun trying them all out, but particular shout out to your favourite, the xenobiologist, and my favourite, the hacker. Most tie into a specific mechanism in Lockdown, which means they're also a really great way to learn the ropes and get to grips with how to exploit each aspect in an attempt to survive. Lockdown also strives to bring more discussion or backstabbing to the table via the contingency tokens. One is placed face down on the board at the beginning of the game, and this is the active contingency. Then one is dealt to the players, and then the rest are put into the neutral nexus, and these can be discovered through various actions. It's crucial to find out what the active contingency is, because you don't want to hole yourself up in the isolation room, only to discover that anyone in the isolation room is killed upon resolution of the game. They force the players to work together, discuss, deduce, and barter information to great effect. However, while they are good fun, it does add another layer of complexity to an already complex game and another barrier to winning in an already brutal game. So we can see these maybe being divisive. Another thing that will be divisive is the randomness. Now, we generally don't mind the randomness in this game, which is everywhere. It will dictate if and when you make noise, which Nightstalker you attract, if you take damage and how much damage you take. However, others will despise it, and this is not the game for them. Even for us who really enjoys the game, the randomness can sometimes be really hard to take, but that is just the game. You're not likely to win, but you will have an experience, usually. It allows such an epic game to exist and for each game of Lockdown to be unique and dramatic. However, we will say we do think some areas regarding randomness could be much improved.
In Lockdown, if you run out of malfunction or fire tokens, then the facility will be destroyed. And in this game, there's a certain type of event card which relates to putting those tokens on the board that can absolutely just do one. Because these cards are wildly swingy, because one round they might do sweet nothing, or they might dump almost the entire supply of that kind of token onto the board, just due to how variable the game state of Lockdown can be. And what's the problem here is they tend to combo in successive rounds to make players go from a game state where they have nothing to worry about to insta-killing them all by exploding the facility before anyone can actually react. And when this happens, it's anti-fun, and it's one of the worst experiences you can have in board gaming. And what I find particularly annoying is this was a common complaint about original Nemesis, and nothing's been done to rectify it here. And to be clear, we're not criticizing the system, because if these tokens kind of accumulate over the game and you ignore them and then the facility explodes, that's on you, and I think that's thematic and fair. What we hate is the fact that because these cards are so wildly swingy, that you can have a game state where all players can die within 30 minutes of a 3-hour game based on no fault of their own. Also, the randomized layout of the entire facility can be particularly frustrating, because you could begin the game with the room you need for your objective literally next door to where you start, and by round 3 you're just figuring out how to escape, or it could be 3 levels away and the last room discovered in the game. And this creates an imbalance between the players in terms of how easy the game is, and that's a lot harder to take than a randomized dice roll or a card draw. And to be fair, this is a good system for creating variability and replayability, and it keeps things interesting and fresh. And there's probably no easy way to fix this that wouldn't change the feel of the game. Perhaps in Lockdown it's just more present because characters start in different locations.
With all that out the way, it's finally time for Nemesis versus Nemesis Lockdown. We personally think it's pretty cheeky to call this a standalone expansion, because it isn't really an expansion so much as a standalone game. We feel that unless you're a huge Nemesis fan, there's really no need to own both games. So much of the content, components and gameplay is redundant in Lockdown if you already own Nemesis. The Nightstalkers are just the same as the Intruders, and almost all of the objectives, item cards, event and attack decks are near identical to Nemesis. That said, if you're going to get one, we'd recommend Lockdown. The characters are more fun and interesting, and the game just feels more evolved and refined due to the new mechanisms. However, nothing has been altered or fixed from Nemesis. The new mechanisms have just been layered over the top of what was already there, so all of the problems people had with Nemesis are still issues in Lockdown. So, final thoughts. Lockdown isn't going to be for everyone, that's for sure. If it is for you though, it's an experience like no other. We don't know of any other games that can create such dramatic, tension-filled, climactic moments. It's also pretty addictive in that even though you'll die and fail often, it draws you back each time, armed with the knowledge you've gained from the previous plays.
But this is going to be a tough game to learn, especially with all of its intricacies, and sometimes you'll just be plain unfun and unfair. But in comparison to Nemesis, this is a stronger option, in part due to its fun and interesting characters and the excellent mechanisms that have been introduced. That said, it's disappointing though how much of this game is copy-pasted from the original Nemesis, when you consider how fun the innovative mechanisms they introduced are. And in particular, it's disappointing that none of the common complaints people had with the original Nemesis has been looked at or addressed here. But if you're going to get one, Nemesis Lockdown is the one to get. So that was our review of Nemesis Lockdown, and we hope it was helpful. We also, again, have that buyer's guide if you want more information on the franchise. And thank you for watching. If this was helpful, we would really love if you subscribe, and feel free to ask us any questions down below.
Yep.
See ya.
Bye.